Our club theme for this year is Rotarians Inspire Hope. Before we move to the main program, I want to provide a little context to the audience. And this may be a cross-cultural clue in case you haven't observed these things about veterans. Military leaders are committed to the success of the team in which they serve. When good things occur, the leader's likely to say, "Our team performed magnificently. Let's show them our appreciation." When mistakes are made, the same leader will likely state, "That failure is my responsibility. We will discuss how to do things better in the future." These are examples of what I call humility, a trait that is expected of senior military leaders. Recently, I heard a comment that illustrates an aspect of humility. A famous leader once said, "I don't know much about humility, but I've noticed that people who have it don't talk about it much." Now that's what I'm talking about, a cross-cultural clue. My thanks to my friend Bill Center for his willingness to talk about our subject today and share some inside the Navy kind of observations. I mentioned earlier that today is annual Veterans Day celebration. Now I'd like to introduce club member Matt LeMaster with a classification of law practice, who will introduce that part of our program. Matt and I became acquainted over 10 years ago in creation of the nonprofit Hire America's Heroes, intended to help hiring managers understand how to hire veterans for key jobs based on demonstrated skills and abilities. One day I was in Matt's office and he saw my Rotary pin. I already knew that Matt was an Army veteran and a loyal Husky, but I learned that day that Matt had previously been a member of Bellevue Rotary. Our conversation led to my proposing Matt as a member here in Seattle 4. The moral of this piece of the program is, wear your Rotary pin with pride. You may identify someone who should join our club. Matt, the podium is yours, sir.
Thank you, President Jimmy. 2 seconds ago, I touched my computer screen and everything went dark. And I'm thankful that you all it came back. So I was a moment. Anybody who's been in the military know that there's a person named Murphy, and he's alive and well, and he's out there causing problems, and he continues to cause problems no matter where you're at. So Jimmy asked me to host this program, and we're going to talk for about 22 minutes. And he suggested, and it was a great suggestion, to talk about Veterans Day and to interview one of our members who is a veteran but also has strong feelings. And I had the opportunity, and it was Jimmy's suggestion to talk to Bill Center. And I first met Admiral Center in, I think, 2005, and he probably doesn't even remember. He came to when I was at Bellevue Rotary and came and spoke about some philanthropies that are important to him. And we're going to chat about Veterans Day, but just a few notes about Admiral Center. He's an Annapolis grad. He rose to the rank of Rear Admiral, which is a 1-star, which is a huge accomplishment, from plebe, climbing the statue at Annapolis with a bunch of other plebes, to become a flag officer. And he spent 35 years in the Navy, and afterwards continued to give back to the community, and went to the University of Washington for graduate school. And I think this is just super cool, because in my own experience, a lot of veterans, complete their military career and then they don't give back to the community, or they don't give it back in the same manner they gave while continued military service. Bill Center was the University of Washington Distinguished Alumni Veteran Award in October 25 of 2020. And then the thing of it is that I think is most important, he's just a remarkably enthusiastic person. So with that, and that's just a lot of fun to be around. So with that, I thought that we would just chat and have a conversation. And we'll be around afterwards also to have in a breakout room to have a chat about what it means to be a veteran. And so without further ado, Bill, I understand that you were in the Navy for 35 years. When did you know you wanted to be a career naval officer?
Well, I'm going to answer your question, and the basic answer is, yeah, I knew pretty early in my life, but I'm going to take off my hat for two reasons. Because first of all, I'm indoors, and we don't wear our hats indoors in the Navy. And secondly, it's not playing well with my virtual background there. I will just say that when Jimmy asked me to do this, and Matt encouraged me, I was reluctant. And Jimmy's sales pitch was, you know, there are a lot of people that have joined the club since you retired from the Navy and don't really know much about your time in the Navy. And I realized that was true. And I'm always happy to share words about that. And thanks, Carolyn, for Top Gun. I told Matt the other day that during the time I was in the Navy, Top Gun was the most realistic movie about the Navy. And people laugh when they hear that, but that's pretty much what the Navy was like. I didn't look as good with my shirt off playing volleyball. And I couldn't fly an F-14, but I knew plenty of guys that did. And anyway, I'm really excited about the new Top Gun movie coming out next year. I chose to make the Navy a career when I was just a kid, really. I started watching Victory at Sea, those black and white things on TV with the great Richard Rodgers music. I started reading history of the Navy in World War II, and it just resonated with me. When I was 13, my middle school librarian gave me a copy of this book, which I keep. It's a paperback that's falling apart, so I keep it in the Ziploc protected. It was written by Hanson Baldwin, the great military editor of the New York Times. It's called Sea Fights and Shipwrecks. And in that book, I found the story of the USS Houston, the last major U.S. warship afloat in the Western Pacific at the beginning of the war after Pearl Harbor. Sadly, Houston went down in a legendary battle against overwhelming odds in the Sunda Strait. Her captain, Captain Albert Rooks, was from Seattle, and he was mortally wounded in the battle and went down with the ship. 350 or more of the crew members were subsequently captured and ended up in that famous prisoner of war camp that was in the bridge on the River Kwai. Anyway, I read that and it just resonated with me. I said, I want to be the captain of a cruiser. That was my whole goal in joining the Navy. So I knew really early on that's what I wanted to do. The day I graduated from high school, I went out and enlisted. That's it.
Were you influenced by anybody in your family to join the Navy?
My dad was an Army vet. He was a chaplain's assistant during World War II. He was a gifted piano player, so they stuck him into a slot where he could use that skill and never got to go overseas. But when he found out that I wanted to go in the Navy, he was a big encourager. And there were very few people that discouraged it. And I had some other friends that went in the Navy, so it was an easy choice for me.
And so in the Army, you have various branches. So you get to be an engineer, you get to be an artillery officer. How do you get to select your branch or the trajectory in the Navy?
Well, when you're at the Naval Academy, depending on your class standing, you have a fairly wide latitude. If you're academically and physically qualified, you could be an aviator, a pilot. You could be a Marine. You could be a nuclear engineer, mostly on submarines, or you could be a surface officer. Nowadays, cyber warrior. So I knew from the day I went in, though, my goal was to be the captain of a cruiser. So I always wanted to be a surface officer. And folks at the academy kind of laughed about that because I joked with Matt, that's like the infantry of the Navy back then. If you couldn't qualify in any of the other branches, you ended up as a surface officer. And within that, we had subspecialties. I had a subspecialty as an engineer. I was a naval engineer. And then I also had a subspecialty in national security policy planning. But so that was it. But you were an engineer. An Army engineer is a whole different from a Navy engineer. What's an Army engineer do?
Well, just as a note regarding infantry, so it's interesting the path that people take in the military. My nephew just branched infantry, and he was he's finishing up at Washington State, and he sent me a text. The PERSCOM sent out the list. He sent me a text at 4:30 in the morning yesterday. So you know, it's to each his own, and each individual path in the military is wonderful. And my nephew has wanted to be an infantry officer for as long as he has walked the earth, and I'm so happy for him. I was a combat engineer, and you know, what was interesting is my mother did not. She was married to an Army officer, and my mother did not want me to go into the Army. And she thought that she was pushing me away from combat arms, and I selected the engineers. And then I got into becoming a combat engineer, which being a combat engineer is really a bad place to be if you're in war.
Cutting edge.
So my mother's planning just failed miserably, but I had a great time. Was there ever a point during your career when you thought about leaving the service?
You know, I joke about this all the time. At about the 14-year point in my career, I was captain of a frigate, and I was out in the Indian Ocean chasing the USS Carl Vinson around, having a great time. And I got orders to be the chief engineer on the oldest aircraft carrier of the Navy, USS Midway. I did not want those orders. I was really unhappy about it. And it turned out there was nothing I could do about it. It was march or die. And by that time, you know, you're kind of getting close to the 20-year retirement point. So and plus, once you've got orders in hand, you can resign and it will become effective as soon as you complete that assignment you got the orders for. So I could have resigned in protest or being sent to a job I didn't want, but it turned out, and I'll be quite honest about this, I would have never become an admiral if I hadn't gone to that job. It was a great job. It was maybe the second or third best job I had in the whole time I was in the Navy. So, and the other thing, my wife would have never let me leave the Navy. She, you know, there are plenty of, she paid a big price for the load that she carried, but I think she was worried about my ability to make a living in another line of work. And she liked the fact that we had a steady paycheck, and even though we moved around, which we enjoyed, there were ready-made friends that were in the same boat wherever we went, and it was a great. So she wasn't pushing me to get out, that's for sure.
Well, if I can make a recommendation for anybody listening to this program, the Midway, you can take a tour of it in San Diego, and you can see, you know, to the extent that you know, you like to think about big things that people can build, you can see how that ship has been continuously built and rebuilt and restructured from I think from when it was originally laid carrying prop aircraft all the way up to when it was able to launch F-14. It's a pretty fascinating experience.
Yeah. And she was originally, the hull was originally going to be a battleship, and they decided partway through construction they would build it as an aircraft carrier instead. And I never apologized. I had at least one honest job in my life. I was chief engineer on Midway for 3 years. That was honest work.
Well, I was not able to find your initials when I went on a tour there, but I wasn't looking. But I'll look the next time I go there. But hopefully they're carved someplace. But so when you were promoted to Rear Admiral, you were assigned to the Joint Chiefs of Staff. What was it? And that was a very, so I went on active duty in October 22nd of 1990, and it was a very scary time. Because the day I went on active duty they locked down the installation that I was at, and they said all leave is canceled, and we're getting to ramp up for the first Persian Gulf War. What was it like working for General Powell?
Well, I want to answer that question, but you skipped over one of the questions that I had something I want to say about. So I'm gonna put up a picture here, if I can do that.
Oh, sorry.
You see that picture of Reeves there? That cruiser? I can't hear you.
I see it. It's a beautiful picture.
Okay, well, that is the cruiser. I got to be the captain of a cruiser, and that was my dream job, and it was everything I ever thought it would be. And you can see why it has so much appeal just looking at that great picture. And when I walked off of there, I thought, well, that's the end of my career. And I ended up back in DC, and I was lucky enough to work for a really good admiral. And he said, you know, you could be an admiral. And I thought, well, no way. But lo and behold, it happened. And my first assignment was working for General Powell on the Joint Staff. And my immediate boss was General Barry McCaffrey, that a lot of you know here in Seattle, two outstanding leaders. And I would just tell you, I was behind closed doors with them, with General Powell and General McCaffrey, in some very intense situations, dealing with thorny problems, and had a real opportunity to see the man's character. And anything I ever saw is at least as good as the best you ever heard about General Powell. He was an incredible human being, and I was very sad to see his loss. And his memorial service, there was a guy that earned that kind of recognition. I was lucky. I was a diplomat. I traveled all over the world working on arms control negotiations and other diplomatic issues. And my traveling companions were Dr. Bill Perry, who became the Secretary of Defense, and I traveled with him as SecDef. Ash Carter, who became the Secretary of Defense. He was a Deputy Assistant Secretary back then. He was my counterpart in the Office of Secretary. And Strobe Talbot, who was the Special Ambassador to the former Soviet Union and became the Deputy Secretary of State while we were traveling around together. It was an education of a lifetime, the privilege of a lifetime. And then I ended up in San Francisco, closing down the bases there, and then they sent me up here. So it was the 4 years I was at the Joint Staff were some of the most exciting time of my life.
Well, just my own experience with General Powell, I had two experiences with him, and I was an intern for Tom Foley, and this was where President Bush said there's a line in the sand, and I got to sit in the well of where he was a joint session of Congress, and I remember going up the elevator from the Speaker's office with General Powell.
Yeah.
And I didn't say a word, and he didn't say a word, but there was palpable stress after that presentation. And then President Bush's presentation to Congress. And then I got called on active duty, and I received my first set of orders as a line platoon leader for the 2nd Armored Cavalry Regiment, which had been deployed. And then, and I would have been a brand new lieutenant. And General Powell said, he made a general order eliminating all of the brand new officers who are going to deployed units, saying that it's a bad combination of brand new lieutenants to active combat. They need to be trained first. So that was a very big moment in my life, because because obviously he learned his experience from Vietnam, and yep, where brand new lieutenants and combat was not a good mix for success.
We're starting to run a little short of time. I just wanted to say we aren't going to have time to answer questions during this presentation, but we're going to say afterwards, Matt and I. So anybody that wants to ask us questions, you can do that. I think we should get down to like the 4th question from the bottom there, Matt.
You bet. We have 8 minutes left by my clock, and I don't want to be
these are hard
attacked
questions
by 10 afterwards. Yep, you bet. So does it concern you that the military community is becoming so isolated from the general population?
Well, Matt and I talked about this the other day, and I've talked about it with anybody that'll listen for the last 20 years. The all-volunteer force has been a huge success, but one of the unintended consequences of the not having the draft anymore, and there's no way we should go back to the draft. We just don't need that many people. And we're able to attract just extraordinary people into the military. But as a result, fewer and fewer people in the civilian world have real experience with the military. And there's a growing lack of understanding what the military culture is like on the one side, and there's a growing lack of understanding what the civilian culture is like on the other. And I think it's on both of our parts, the military and the civilian, to try to really work to bridge that gap. I was lucky enough to be sent by the Navy to UW to grad school. And that, I think, really helped bridge the gap for me. And I think it helped bridge the gap for my classmates at what's now the Evans School. I just wish that it was a uniform, universal policy in the military. And there are other things we should do too, but yeah, it's a problem. It's not good for our society. It's not good for our democracy to have a Praetorian Guard. We need an army we need a military that's part of the society. And we really do represent society. We come from all walks of society. Anyway, next question.
Well, how do you feel when somebody says thank you for your service?
Oh man, I'm glad he had this question in here, because for years when people started that, it became a trend, I guess, about 20 years ago, just maybe a little bit before I retired. All of a sudden, after Desert Storm, it sort of started, but then after 9/11, it really took up steam. And at first, I just didn't know how to respond. I'll be honest with you. I was taken aback by it because in all the years I'd worn the uniform, nobody ever thanked me, except after I retired. Other currently serving people would see me wearing my ball cap or something, or another piece of Navy paraphernalia, and they would come up and say, thank you for your service. That really meant a lot to me. And for a long time, when people would say, thank you for your service, I would say, if you really want to thank me, help a wounded warrior, or a homeless veteran, or some widows and orphans of warriors that lost their lives in the service. Nowadays, I just say it was a privilege, because it was a privilege. And I know you feel the same way. But I want to show you one other thing that I didn't mention the other day. I'm going to share my screen again. We'll see if I can master this technology here. I would say, if you want to thank somebody, thank those 3 people that are hanging out with me there. That young lady in the picture and over there in the bridal gown, that's my
Bill, we're not seeing your screen yet.
Oh, really? Okay. Oh, I see. I got to click it again. How's that?
There you go.
Anyway, Carla and I started dating before I went to the Naval Academy, and we were engaged for a year and a half before I graduated. And I joked about how she never wanted me to leave the military, but she had a tough time. The first 22 years of our marriage, I was gone from home more than 15 years, day for day, out of the 22 years. I spent more than 10 years of my first 22 years in the Navy actually out on the ocean. And a lot of times when I was home, I wasn't totally there. And, the hardest times in military is the 2 weeks before you go away and the 2 weeks after you come back. And I went away and came back a lot. So these are people that you want to thank somebody for their service. Thank the military families. Thank the military. Don't you agree, Matt? That
I do agree. Last two questions, and we got 4 minutes, and I think we'll do justice to them, because I think they're great questions.
There were a lot of long days and a lot of tough days. But when you think back on your military service, I know you agree with me, we got to do a lot of fun stuff. And we got to go a lot of interesting places and do great things. The families didn't get to do that. They had to pick up the slack. And so if anybody deserves thanks for their service, it's military families. Okay, last 2 questions.
Yeah, two simple questions, but as is often the case, they're the most profound. How should we honor Veterans Day, and then why is Veterans Day important?
Well, tomorrow, the reason I'm wearing my uniform today is I busted it out because I was asked to go tomorrow to a Veterans Day observance at a cemetery in Bellevue and to wear my uniform, represent the Navy over there. And I'm honored to do that. But you notice it's not a parade. I'm going to a cemetery, a veterans cemetery. And I think for most people that lost friends in combat, I lost friends in Vietnam, I lost friends in Afghanistan, and a few others in between. It's about the people that didn't come back for a lot of veterans. They really focus on the people, the ones we left behind, the ones that never could come home. So nothing wrong with the parade, nothing wrong with the music and the celebration, but it's not a day of celebration for me. What about you, Matt?
For me, it's a day of somber reflection. I think there's a ton of people out there who want to divide us and are making money off of our division, and so they're incented to divide us. We're a great country, and to me, it's a day to just kind of, lock arms and celebrate each other and celebrate service to our nation.
Yeah.
I did not have a similar experience. I'm not a product of Vietnam, and my military experience was in the Army, or it was in the 90s. But I feel that there's a lot of division right now, and it's unnecessary. And to me, Veterans Day is all about kind of sticking together and acknowledging that we're a great country.
I was really happy to see the line of folks walking by the tomb of the unknown soldier, laying the flowers there the other day. I thought that was a very unifying thing, and we could do with more of that. What's the last question? We got 45 seconds.
Why is Veterans Day important? I think we kind of touched upon it, but
I do too.
I want to thank you, Bill. When Jimmy asked me to do this, I knew this was going to be a challenging program, and I'm super lucky to have the opportunity to chat with you, and I know that there's a ton of goodwill generated by this program. So thank you so much.
I'll tell my fellow Rotarian, sit next to Matt and ask him what a combat engineer does and learn about his adventure. It's like every boy's dream: design, build, deploy. It's a great job most of the time. And the same with mine. Jeez. Thank you for letting us serve, America. We appreciate it. Back to you
so much,
Jimmy.
Bill and Matt, thank you so much. If you have the chance, I would read through the chat. There's a lot of love for this conversation. There's a lot of love for you guys. So thank you for bringing this conversation. It was very powerful. I learned a lot, and I'm a foreigner. So thank you for all that you do. Take the kudos, thanks to the families, and enjoy what it is that you can enjoy out of tomorrow. And thanks for everything that you do. All right, on with the program. Quick shout out to our dear friends, Liz Powell with Remax on Market. Don't forget to stop by her in Ballard. And Bob Alexander. Those two are our gold sponsors this year. We can't appreciate you enough. So when you want to share today's conversation, when you want to watch it again, and you want to send it out to somebody else on YouTube, that's who you get to thank. All right.
I would just like to say, and Matt can speak for himself, but I'm really appreciative of the wonderful comments that were in the chat. Thank you all for those kind words.
Yeah, super gratifying.
So go ahead, you can ask us anything. I don't know what's going on with the Seahawks, but otherwise, any question is not off limits.
Well, I see that Suzanne Griffith asked, will the Peace Corps ever receive recognition as service to our country? And I think that's a great question.
I would agree. I think members of the military have nothing but the highest regard for the Peace Corps. And, I think talked about, Matt and I talked about the gulf, the growing gap between the military and civilian culture. And I often get the feeling that people that haven't served in the military think that people in the military like war and want to go to war. And actually, there's nobody that likes war less and doesn't want to go to war more than the people in the military. When you go to war, it's because things did not work out the way you planned. My favorite slogan about the Navy is a global force for good. That's what we want to be. We want to be just like the Peace Corps. So I hope the Peace Corps will get recognition. I think in addition to the Space Force, which has recently come about, I think we're soon going to see some kind of a cyber warfare force also. Either that or it'll be a joint command, which it is a joint command already, but it'll be one of the most prominent joint commands because cyber warfare is a really growing field. But peace is our goal.
Bill, this is Gary Moore. I distinctly remember sitting in your office in the Trade Center down near the waterfront the day that the Seattle Times had the picture of the Polaris, the Polaris boat going out on its last patrol.
Right.
And your comment, I thought, was very telling and speaks just to what you were talking about, which was we accomplished our mission. Mission accomplished because we never fired a single salvo from those boats.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Bill, I will echo your comments about the inability or unrealistic view that people who not in the military have about the military. And that is, in '64, I was in Berlin, and our battalion officers, there was 32, 33 officers in our battalion. We had a battalion plus. And we had only 24 of us voted for Goldwater, because the rest voted for Johnson because we weren't going to go to Vietnam. And they didn't want to be killed. So you're right.
Any other?
Bill and Matt, did you guys notice there are some questions in the chat if you'd like to pull
Sure.
some of those out?
I can ask one, Caroline.
Yeah, go for it, Nyasha.
So Bill, a while ago you talked about young people. I'd love to get your perspective. My daughter is 15 right now, and every generation seems to believe that young people are going to, basically destroy the world. But I see some phenomenal traits in that generation that's coming up. I would love to get your thoughts around young people and young people today.
Absolutely. The young people today are extraordinary, and the military is lucky that we're getting our fair share of those outstanding young people. I honestly believe this, and I will say this to you in all sincerity, Nyasha. The three best schools in the country for young women are West Point, the Air Force Academy, and the Naval Academy. Those schools are, there's a level playing field there, unlike in any other schools around. And the opportunities that are available to those young women are incredible. And unfortunately, it's harder for the women to get in than the men, and it's because the quality of the women applicants is so much higher. It isn't because they have fewer slots. It's because it's more competitive for the women because they're just first rate. But the military is a young person's business. I retired from the military in 1999. And when I retired, a lot of people said to me, you're too young to be leaving. They should keep you. You've got all this experience. Two things about that. Number one, if they didn't get rid of the deadwood at the top, like me, there wouldn't be any room to move the young people ahead. And if you can't promote your young people to positions of responsibility, I had command of my first ship 4.5 years after I was commissioned. Wow. You know, if you can't present opportunities to young people like that, they're not going to hang around. Especially the best ones will be the first ones to go. So that's why you got to get rid of the old guys. And secondly, it's a young person's business. I will tell you, it took me an hour to put on my uniform today, and I don't have on the whole uniform. I'm not even wearing the pants. It's not just that. I mean, it's so hard. It's hard work. And so it is a young person's business. You go to board an aircraft carrier and they're doing these extraordinary things. The average age of that crew is right there between 20 and 21 years old. And, you know, it's so exciting. We see the airplanes taking off and landing on the carriers and everything. Let me tell you what's impressive is, okay, you get out of the nuclear power plant and see who's in charge. There's some 20-year-old, 21-year-old sitting there running the whole thing. And yeah, there are some officers around, but the 20-year-old has got the thing right in his hands. And then you go up on the flight deck in the middle of flight ups at night. It's 50 knots of wind across the deck. The rain is blowing sideways. And if you're a pilot sitting in the front of an F-18, an F-18 is designed so that the pilot is actually sitting in front of the nose wheel. So when they're parking those things so they can get them all on deck, they want them stacked pretty close together. Scares the hell out of the Air Force guys how close we park our planes together. 6, 8 inches apart, and the pilot can't see anything except an 18-year-old kid standing on the deck holding 2 red flashlights going, just move another 6 inches closer to the edge of the flight deck. And the pilot's already sitting out over the water. You know, that is the kind of young people that we have out there. And the pilot trusts that young person and they don't let them down. Yeah, I'm passionate about this.
I have a quick question.
Oh, go ahead, Mark. And then we'll have Suzanne if you're still on, and then Lorna. But go ahead, Mark.
Yeah, I was wondering, Bill and Matt, we've seen a lot of stories about how it's hard for people who served in the military to transition to jobs in the private sector. And I know that every business that hires veterans is like, oh my gosh, why didn't we hire veterans sooner? Why does that difficulty exist, and what can we do about it?
I'll let Matt talk about his experience, whether it was a difficult transition for him, and then I'll talk about mine.
Yeah, so when I went to law school, so I was not in combat and did not have any experience. I had a ton of fun in the Army. I mean, there were some times that were stressful, but when I went off active duty, I was an executive officer of the largest engineer company in Europe, and so we had about 250 guys, and it was not an integrated unit at that time. It is now. Meaning there were not men and women. It was all men, because the Army had not evolved at this point. And I went to law school, and I really struggled academically because it was really hard to concentrate, because in the military you're doing things, you're looking at 80% solutions. In law school, how the professors distinguish academic excellence is, looking at the nth degree on any answer. You have to study, you have to get that 99% solution, and that's how you develop the craft as a good attorney. And so it took time to transition. And so I think that sometimes, kind of transitioning that mindset to the military is very fast paced. You're operating at 60% information. You're kind of using a lot of gut instincts. And I think there's a vast variety of things that you're doing. And so I think transitioning perhaps to the civilian life sometimes can be a challenge. I can say that the attorneys that we hire, and we hire fantastic post 9/11 attorneys. I work with, in fact, right after this, I'm going down working on a deal with he was a Galaxy pilot, a C-17 pilot, and went back to law school. And so he's an Air Force Academy grad. He's a fantastic attorney. I love working with him. He has a tremendous attention to detail. He did serve in combat, and he's experienced the same type of thing. It just kind of takes time to transition to doing things at a little bit slower pace and a little bit, a relaxed tempo than there is in the military. And so I think and that's what Jimmy and I did that Hire America's Hero, was trying to bridge that gap. And I think it was pretty effective. Amazon is a logistics company, and I think to a large degree, they've been really successful at having people with prior military service work at Amazon and run their logistics. Amazon is effectively a military, a military organization, and moving packages, substitute bullets for your dog food, and it's the same thing. So that's my thoughts.
Well, I agree with everything you said. I would just add a couple of points there. My grad school experience was different. I was still on active duty, and I loved grad school. It was a great change of pace for me, and it was so much easier than undergrad at the Naval Academy. And that was really because I had really learned how to work hard after being out in the fleet. I learned what hard work was. And so grad school seemed easy after being out there and working 18-hour days. So that was a nice change of pace. But when it came time for me to leave the Navy and look for another career, it was a difficult transition. And I think my experience is probably similar to a lot of veterans. The hardest question you will ever get asked is, what do you want to do? And once you figure out the answer to that question, see, once you knew you wanted to be a lawyer, it's a pretty straight ahead solution. But a lot of people don't have that answer yet. And my advice when I talk to young soldiers, sailors, airmen, and Marines that are leaving the military or retirees is the same thing. Find somebody that has a job that you think, man, I'd really love to have a job like that, and learn how to describe it really well. So that anytime somebody says, what do you want to do? You can give them that description, and you'll find there are plenty of people out there that are willing to help you find that job. But you can't just say, well, I don't know what I want to do. I'll take any job I can get. You got to have a goal. And, I had a goal when I was in the military, but when I left, I forgot you need to set goals again, and you need to know what you want to do. So that's my 2 cents worth on that. That's a great question, though.
Okay, how about Suzanne Griffin next, and then Marcia, and then Jeff Bork.
Okay. My question is that there are more opportunities for women in the U.S. Navy now. My parents were both in the Navy. Mom was a link trainer. My father was a pilot. Are there Navy pilots that are women?
The opportunities for women in the Navy now are virtually limitless. The one thing they probably can't do is be a SEAL, and that isn't because they're women. It's just because it's too hard.
Yeah.
Physically. And there was a great piece by Lester Holt. I keep referring back to this, and you can still find it on NBC News. If you Google Lester Holt interviews 4 Navy women commanding officers, he interviewed 4 women of color at the Navy base. I think they were in San Diego. I'm almost positive. I think he did it remotely, but they were there. 3 Black women and 1 Hispanic woman.
Mm-hmm.
They were all captains of ships, and they were all mothers. They all had 2 kids, and they were just eye-wateringly good. They were just so impressive. And then he goes just interviewing them about being the captain. And at the end, he throws out, oh, by the way, all 4 of these women are nuclear engineers.
Oh, wow.
So the next assignment after being captain of these ships is they're going to go be the reactor officer or the chief engineer on board one of our nuclear aircraft carriers. So, yeah.
Thank you.
I mean,
thank you.
In the Army, every single job is open to both genders. There are women who've graduated from Ranger School and that's kind of the ultimate, that's kind of the analog in the Army for the SEAL school. There are probably SEALs who disagree with that, but they're both pretty hard.
They don't disagree with that. That's true.
the limiting factor in the Army, you're just tested whether you can do a job. So for example, if you're a tank gunner, you have to be able to go like this and like this, sitting down with 120, it's about 100-pound round, 120 millimeter tank round is about 100 pounds. And then you got to be able to pull the charge back out, all upper body, and then get it out of the tank. And a basic tank load has 56 rounds. And going down a tank range, you'll fire a round every probably 20 seconds. So it's boom, 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 boom. And it's really hard. So you're just tested out with it. And if there's a woman who can do that job, they get to do that job.
Well, and Suzanne will appreciate this. One of the things military learned in Afghanistan is we need women in our special forces because there are places you go where women can only talk to the women.
That's correct.
Yeah, I was there. The women are the ones that really know what's going on. So if you want to find out what's going on, you got to be able to talk to the women. And so you better have some women with you if you're out there in the field. And you have to work with the local people.
Yeah, thank you.
All right, Marcia, you're up.
I want to say one more thing about women.
Okay, go ahead.
We need the best people we can get in the military. About half the best people turn out to be women. That's all I need to say.
Thank you.
Yeah, I mean, there was some controversy. It was like, I think in the early 2000s, and I forget the head of the Joint Chief was saying, without women, we cease to exist. The military cannot do its job. And so I think the Army, I don't think that's, my brother's a general officer. It is no longer, gender is no longer an issue. LGBTQ is no longer an issue. These are issues that, and when I talked about, there's a lot of people who are trying to divide us. These are not issues in the military.
Unfortunately,
that's wonderful.
Sexual assault and harassment are still an issue. But what I would say about it is two things. Number one, I don't really think it's more prevalent in the military than it is in civilian culture. The military is just more willing to face up to it. That's my belief. And secondly, the military justice system is not well suited for dealing with that issue. Mm-hmm. And I think Congress is on the right track with setting up a separate track for dealing with sexual assault in the military. And I personally hope that happens. So Marcia, we cut you off. We got so excited.
No, that's fine. Thank you. Yeah, no, speaking of issues, so the question I had, just looking around, I see a lot of the homeless people and people holding up signs by the roadside, and they say, I'm a veteran and I'm in the military. And really, and I've volunteered with some groups helping homeless, and you come across people that did serve this country, and some were pretty high ranking. Can you speak to some of that? And I was just like, I'm in America, I'm an immigrant. But then I wonder, how does it happen to where you have people who serve this country, and a large number of them, even more and more now, ending up homeless? How does that happen? You know, maybe you talked about the goals and things like that earlier. So thanks.
There are homeless veterans out there, and there are some really good programs. The Compass Center here in Seattle has a really, really outstanding homeless veterans program. And unfortunately, there are people out there also who are homeless who just think that the best way to get a handout is to say they're a veteran and aren't necessarily really veterans. So I'm savvy enough to be able to ask somebody about their service and find out in 3 questions whether they're really a veteran or not. If they're really a veteran, then I know how to get them help. Veterans want to help other veterans. We have veterans that have mental problems. We have veterans that have drug problems. We have veterans that have family problems. And in this day and age, the sad reality is for anybody in our culture that's living paycheck to paycheck, you're just one automobile accident away from being homeless. I mean, the margins between having a roof over your head and being on the street are thinner than they ought to be, and that includes some prior military people. So have a heart for them.
House President Jeff Borick, you're up.
Hi, Jeff.
Admiral Bill and Matt, thank you so much. Meaning absolutely zero disrespect, but I think women in the military is my hope for our best chance for avoiding a next world war. And I think you only have to look at someone like...
How about women in the White House and in the Congress?
All of that as well, absolutely. So just pivoting quickly, loved your talk today, loved your sharing, thank you again. On the topic of nationalism, two thoughts. One, you talked about, the need to, keep a long-term perspective. And just like in vaccines, we have people today that don't appreciate, what the world went through before polio vaccines came into fruition. How do we keep the general public's awareness of military history and its importance, along with, again, just not having the military segmented to a small portion of our rich tapestry of society? And then specifically, your thoughts on the South China Seas and the Navy's important role to play there in the future.
Okay. I'm going to take the last one first because that's the easiest one. There are people in our country who think war with China is inevitable. I do not. I think the US and China have more interests in common than we have in conflict. And so we need to work to find ways to resolve the conflicts and focus on the interests that we have in common and work together on those goals. It frustrates the heck out of me when somebody predicts that something as bad is going to happen, like war with China, and then they work like the dickens to make sure it happens so they look smart. If you think something bad is going to happen, I think you have a moral responsibility to work to make sure it doesn't happen. The Taiwan issue is going to be tough. It's going to be tough. I don't think most Americans understand how strongly the people of China, not just the leadership, but the people of China think that Taiwan is a Chinese province. And the 9-dash line, the 7-dash line, those are not figments of imagination. Students in China study 5,000 years of history, and they know it just like we know our 250 years, 300, pick your number. Now, on the business of education and nationalism, that's just way hard. We've, the cat's out of the bag. We have the internet, and all it takes to become a recognized expert on something is to post it on the internet, and everything you read there apparently is true. So I think we're going to have to raise a generation. We're going to have to raise several generations of people who were raised in a culture like that and have the appropriate level of skepticism and know how to.
Matt's comment about ensuring that leadership in Vietnam had past experience in actual hands-on war activity, again, just to me reiterates the importance of that historical.
Well, it's a wonderful comment, Jeff, but as a student of history, I will tell you, if history teaches us anything, it's that we're really bad about learning the lessons of history. If we learned the lessons of Vietnam, we wouldn't have been in Iraq and Afghanistan. When we went to anyone who knows me and knew me after 9/11 knows that I said, no, we're not going to Iraq. It's such an obviously dumb idea. It'll never happen. I was wrong, so.
I'll just close by saying I'm reading some history about the Roman Empire these days. And you're right, history, unfortunately, not only repeats itself, but it makes for bad rhymes over and over again.
Yeah, well, that's why getting the women in charge would give us more hope.
Thank you.
Hey, Ryan Bunbury, are you still on? Ryan, you had a great question for Bill.
Admiral Bill, first of all, thank you. for your service. My grandfather fought in World War II in the Korean War. He was in the Army, the Air Force, and the Navy. And so I just, from my heart to yours, thank you. And Matt is to you as well, and all those who have served. My question is this. We have an innate desire to teach the next generation about the value and cost of freedom. And I was just curious from you, in a nutshell, maybe a life lesson or a word of advice, just a word of wisdom to the next gen that we might be able to echo following this meeting here today.
I'll give it to all gens, not just the next gen. America has lost sight of what our core values are. Jimmy talked about the military's core values, and I know what the core values of the Navy are. I could tell you right up. Courage, honor, commitment. Those are the core values of the Navy and the Marine Corps. Okay. What are the core values of the United States? If you ask most Americans, you get answers that are all over the place. Democracy, which isn't really a value, capitalism, also not a value. But if you ask somebody who is outside our country and looks at us, and I had this experience in the years I worked with all the international fellows that came to the Evans School. I asked them, what are America's core values? I got the same answers over and over again. Hope, opportunity, and freedom. Those are America's core values. And if every American could understand that those were our core values, hope, opportunity, and freedom, and use that as a yardstick to measure our public policy by, we'd be much better off. And you hear a lot about how people around the world are mad at America, they're upset with America. No, they're not. They're disappointed with America because we're not living up to our core values. Other than that, I have no opinion. What about you, Matt?
So I think a sense of shared service, that I think the kids, I think Bill's right. The kids today are fantastic. The junior attorneys that I work with who served in Iraq and Afghanistan are fantastic. My nephew, when I'm at Washington State ROTC, these are great kids. But I also say my children graduated from Mercer Island High School, and there was not a single kid who enlisted in the Army. And that is, or enlisted in any service. Enlisted. And so, when, and this is my one foray into politics, when political leaders, when their children are serving, and not just the political leaders, because there's a model where a political leader does a year in Afghanistan and they run for office and they check that box. But when it's your kids who are serving in Afghanistan, your decision cycle is going to be a lot different. And I think that when your own children are on the line, and I would have my children go in the Army. I'd love it if they went in the Army, or the Air Force or the Navy. Space Force, not so much. But I think that there has to be a sense of shared service, and I think that we all need to put our risk capital out there, and if we do, we'll make better decisions. And that's my little foray into politics.
I want to give you a footnote there, Matt. I wouldn't use the word shared service. I would say what we need is a sense of shared responsibility. And, that's one of the reasons we're having a problem with the vaccines and with wearing masks is we don't have a sense of shared responsibility. And I think if you have a sense of responsibility for your community, for your country, for your fellow man, then the decision to become a member of the military is a whole different thing. That's what the service is built on.
All right, Jaime, take us home.
Love you, Jaime. You're still on mute.
Muted.
Last question.
Yeah, I just want to take a statement first and foremost. It's really an honor and truly refreshing to hear from a high esteemed caliber of a character like yourself, an admiral, to say these things in here that I echo inside myself about these wars that we put ourselves in, these situations that we put ourselves as Americans. You're completely right. The world is disappointed. And it's just this craziness of me just saying it and hearing it from someone else is immensely powerful, just because it makes me feel like there is a hope. And you're right, we should have more women in our service and in our Congress and in all different ways. And thank you, Matt, for advocating that if people had their children in military, they would make different decisions in how we just go to war. More justification, more truth, more honesty, more integrity towards, is this really the right call, and what is the evidence and base? So I just want to say thank you from the bottom of my heart, and many other people who feel the same way, young people, that it's really nice to hear that. And we don't get to hear that often from high-ranking people. We just don't. My question kind of shifts towards climate change. And I really want to understand if it's ever possible that can the military services, all the different branches, take that next step to be the, a lot of these bases are all across the world, but in the United States themselves, and they're in very remote places. Could they be the beacon of hope, knowing that this is how, hey, we have our base run 100% renewable energy. We're harnessing powers in different ways. I'm wondering, can the military be can that be their war, their new front to unite people to understand, like, this base in North Carolina or Montana or whatever is 100% renewable, and we're doing these kind of things to enhance the environment, because it's causing us trouble. And I just wonder if that's a possibility.
Yeah, I can answer that question. When I came to the Joint Staff working for General Powell and General McCaffrey, that was my portfolio. And I can tell you from 1990 onward, in the national security strategy of the United States, climate change has been listed as an existential threat, as a security threat. It's something the military has taken seriously, despite considerable pushback from Congress at different times. And so I feel like the military is very focused on this issue. They see it as a threat to global security. That because of the migration that will take, the economic displacement that will take place, all of the other factors. So I hope people will pay attention to military leaders when they talk about this. They tend to kind of get pushed aside as, well, that's not your dog, but it really is. I want to say one more thing before we wrap up. Suzanne made this beautiful post. And, we were talking about a global force for good. She made the point that in Afghanistan, without the military presence there, the nonprofits and the humanitarian aid people couldn't have done their job.
Right.
I hearken back to the ill-fated mission in Mogadishu, Somalia, that, was the subject of Black Hawk Down. I can't say this without getting choked up. There's some heroes there. But one of the heroes, I talked about the families being heroes too. One of the Marines that was killed there in Mogadishu. Some reporter, kind of not thinking, I guess, walked up to the father of one of these young Marines that was killed, or it was a soldier, it wasn't a Marine. No, it was a Marine. I remember distinctly he was a Marine. And said, well, what do you think about your son dying over there in Mogadishu? He said, my son knew why he was there. He was there to help feed the hungry. I can't think of any better thing to give your life for. Jeez, that's hard. But, people that are out there, they know what they're doing. And when somebody tells you, well, that's not the military's job, I say the hell it isn't. If the only way you could feed people is if you're carrying a gun, then you need the military there. And unfortunately, there are places around where the only way you can do it is if you're heavily armed. And the military is trained and equipped for that. So I'm sorry for getting choked up, but that's what Veterans Day is about for me.
Seattle 4 is a club that enjoys singing. Our opening song is a music video produced locally at Joint Base Lewis McChord. It provides the popular service songs for our Army, Navy, Air Force, and Marine Corps. I'll tell you later about additional uniformed services, but then we'd have a 20-minute video. This video also showcases Americans on the road to being veterans by serving in uniform today. After our song, we'll invite club member Tom Massaros with the classification of business consultants and services to the podium to lead us in our inspiration for the day. Sit back now and enjoy a glimpse of our fellow Puget Sound area residents in the Armed Forces Medley, to be followed at the podium by fellow member Tom Massaros.
Hello, I'm Command Sergeant Major Waylon Petty, your Joint Base Lewis McChord Command Sergeant Major. On behalf of all the service members and veterans from JBLM, I want to wish you all a happy Veterans Day. This is a special day we set aside each year to honor this nation's 18 million living military veterans, as well as to honor the men and women who served in America from its inception to the present day. JBLM is a unique installation, as it's not only a joint base of Army and Air Force, but we're also home to the Navy Cargo Handling Battalion and Marine Corps Detachment. To show our support of all military members this Veterans Day, please enjoy the Armed Forces Medley performed by our very own Army First Corps rock band, followed by a message from a service member representing each branch.
Yeah.